Okay, awesome. I'm seeing attendees pour in. This is a good sign. It always makes me nervous before a webinar whether or not people are actually going to attend, regardless of what the registrations say. So this is encouraging. All right, while the numbers trickle in, I think it's a good idea to start to get to know everyone and to get you comfortable with this Zoom webinar platform. I don't know of a single person, including my 9-year-old kids, who don't know Zoom at this point. So I guess that benefits us. But if you can all open up your chat window, again, just to get comfortable, I want to hear your name. If you can type in your name, where you're from. And then I have, I think it's a pretty good question. I want to hear your favorite activity discovered during coronavirus lockdown. This is not intended to be insensitive, but I'm finding with my kids and wife, we're always trying to be creative about what we do with our time. So let's see those names. Deborah from Tulsa, Adam from Calgary, Robin from Chicago. Awesome. We've got a good crowd joining us. I don't see any recommendations on activities. RumiCube. Never heard of it. I don't know what that is. Bob from Sacramento, Jim from Atlanta. This is awesome. Early morning walks. Oh, I love early morning walks. The cool breeze in Utah is one of the greatest things in the world. Frank from New Jersey. Amit from Mumbai. Wow, we've got a global audience. Someone from Germany. The window's scrolling too quickly, so I can't keep up. This is good, though. Favorite activity, evening walks. We take bike rides in my family. I've got 3 daughters, twins that are 9, and a little baby that's 2. Actually, I got to tell you that my favorite activity, my wife and I play foosball in the evening, and the winner gets to rest. The loser has to put the kids to bed. I think that's my favorite activity now.
Yeah, you should lose on purpose to give your wife a break, right?
I don't have to lose on purpose. She usually beats me. I'm pretty aggressive. Sandra from Toronto. Having more time to listen and play great music. We've got Michael Pedone slaying his guitars behind him. Michael, do you want to give us a little introduction to the guitars there?
Oh, sure, no problem. The camo is an ESP Camel 2. That's my heavy metal one. I actually got a couple of YouTube videos of me playing that one. If I had a favorite, it'd be the Paul Reed Smith hanging behind me. It's a custom 24, and then you can see the headstock over there. That's the good old classic custom Les Paul. So got a few of them.
Everyone that's attending right now, you thought this was about understanding the number one mistake salespeople are making, but really that's a ruse. We're trying to direct you to Michael's YouTube videos. So go YouTube Michael Pedone guitar, and let's get some good entertainment here. Well, I think we've got enough people. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining. We have the special privilege today of having Michael Pedone join our webinar. By way of intro, Michael Pedone is the founder of SalesBuzz.com. It's an online training company for B2B sales teams that need to overcome call reluctance, never needed more than now, and build a sales playbook for selling by phone. Michael, thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, we do a lot of these webinars, and I know it's best practice to wait until the end to unveil the main point of the webinar, but I'm kind of tired of tactics. No more games. Let's just get into the meat of this thing. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think what you're going to share with us and the how behind how to fix the problem sets the stage for the rest of this conversation. There's a lot of good input here from Michael on how to make the most of your selling and your sales teams, and how to be the most effective possible team you can possibly be right now. So Michael, let's go ahead and kick it off. What is the number one mistake sales teams are making right now, and how do they fix it?
Well, and I appreciate that. And first of all, I think the number one mistake salespeople are making now is the same that they were probably making pre-COVID. And before I jump right on in, I think it's important for everybody to know that I've been a straight commission sales rep for over 25 years. So selling by phone, I mean, every mistake you're making, I've already made, and I have a solution for it. So when I say that this is probably the number one mistake salespeople are making now, especially during the COVID virus, it's based on the history that I've had. And that number one mistake is this, is when they get in, they start doing their outbound calls, they're doing their, what I would call follow-up calls first. They're trying to close those deals that are hanging out there. So they're doing a lot of the follow-up calls, they're spending their energy on that. And the problem is this, is they're waiting to do their first time calls in the afternoon. They have a lot less energy then. They don't make as many as they should. They say, oh, I'll just make it up the next day. They come in the next day. What do first? Fire up their computer. They start looking for people to call to close. They start doing their follow-up calls, right? Trying to follow up people, trying to get that deal across the finish line. Another day goes by. It's like a farmer that just wants to keep reaping, but they're never planting seeds. And this is how sales slumps happen. And then the bigger issue is when you're starting to feel the effects of that sales slump, you start to change your sales process because like all of a sudden nothing's working. So you start to change what was working when you were putting in the energy. And so now you're in a real bad shape because you don't have the pipeline because you weren't doing enough of the first time calls first. And now you're getting desperate and you think that it's your sales techniques that you might have to change a little bit. And so now you're just a big ball of mess. And that's when you have really bad sales slumps happen. And the best way to stay out of it is just to get disciplined, create some call blocks where, you know, before noon, like say between 9 and 10:30, you're doing nothing but your first time calls first. And then, you know, save your follow-up calls for the afternoon. If you just follow that simple step, that be disciplined in that one area, you're going to see your numbers take off. If you know, it might not be in the first day, the first week, but eventually you're going to have that solid pipeline and you're going to eliminate and minimize those drastic sales slumps.
You know, so we've done a ton of research around the follow-up call, around being persistent, around immediacy, and the 10x factor when you're immediately following up with hot leads. This kind of plays into it, I think. I don't think there's a conflicting story here. So I want to pull on this thread a little bit. When you talk about call blocks, what's the right call block time? And when you say you can actually accelerate performance by doing this, what have you seen tactically with your customers?
Again, I think it's important to know that my background is more of almost like a boiler room. I don't know if how many of you guys have actually seen the movie Boiler Room, that sales movie. If you haven't, I'd highly recommend it. If you haven't seen The Wolf of Wall Street, I mean, that's like that era that I grew up where when you walked in the door, first of all, if you showed up to work on time, you were already 15 minutes late, right? So yeah. I come from an era where as soon as you walk in the door after the meeting, it's time to rock, and you're picking up that phone from start to finish until the end of the day. Now things are a little bit different, right? So we have SDRs, we have BDRs, right? We have AEs. Some salespeople still handle everything from start to finish, but we have social selling that's involved now, where we're using that to do some prospecting. So we have more things on our plate now than before. With here's the phone book, there's a phone, get dialing or get out the door, right? Yeah. So with that being said, there's what's right for a solopreneur or a small SDR team compared to an enterprise team. I don't think there's one size that fits all. However, with everybody working from home, the one common thread that I'm seeing is people are having a hard time getting that first time calls first. So the good news of what I'm going to say here is there is no right or wrong. There's just better and what's better for you. So if you know that you have to do your prospecting, sometimes, listen, get up early if you have to and do it before the day starts. You know, build that list. You should always have a list ready to go, you know, before the day starts. But have a list of people that are suspects, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever, and you have a commitment. Say, listen, I'm not doing anything until I knock out these 10, 20, or 30 calls where I call them first times.
Yeah. And
then you go to your follow-up calls, right? So you can break your day up that way. But the biggest challenge, like I said, I'll just repeat it again. I mean, all the people we got hundreds of people in this class, right? Yeah. How many of you who started the day, be honest in the chat box, how many of you started the day with you made follow-up calls first? I'm going to say probably just about every one of you, right? Look at all the comments here. You start with the follow-up calls first. And why are we doing it? We're doing it because it's easier, right? Yeah. We've already had some kind of conversation with them. It's less stress on us. It's easy. Here's the problem. When do we typically have more energy? Normally, we have more energy in the morning. So why are we doing the easy task when we have the most energy? Shouldn't we do the harder task first when we have the most amount of energy? And then in the afternoon, listen, if you commit to taking that cold shower, if you will, to start your day, meaning you come in and you know, I'm going to do all my first time calls before noon. You come back after lunch, the rest of the day is cake. The pressure is off of you. You're doing your follow-up calls from 1 to 5. And then maybe even you take about halfway through that time, maybe around 3:30 or so, maybe you take a half-hour break and you go, you know what? I'm going to build my list for tomorrow, right? And so you build that list for tomorrow and you have it set, and then you finish the day strong, the last hour of the day. I always like to call that power hour. It's your just all-out calls, any first-time or follow-up that you haven't done. If you just discipline yourself to do that enough, you're going to have a pipeline. You're not going to have to worry about a sales slump due to not having planting any crops.
I think the principle is totally sound, and having that discipline can change the game for you. I come, now I'm in a marketing strategy role at XANT. Prior to my life here, I spent 10 plus years as an enterprise field rep. And I learned maybe too late in my career the value of having a disciplined time each week. In fact, for me, when I was developing territory, I had this one territory at my last job. It covered 17 states. I was selling cloud-based solutions to utilities. I had to block off not just hours, but it was a couple of days a week where it was just cold calling, reaching out to customers without any previous contact. It beat me up, but man, when I learned the product, I learned our pitch, I learned how to connect with customers at an executive level. I was able to build quite a bit of pipeline in a short amount of time just by being disciplined. So I totally believe in the soundness of that principle. And now for the benefit of everyone here, I'm going to share my screen because you and I, when we were preparing for this, we went through a number of questions that were connected to phone and email and prospecting and some of the best practices. And I think this all ties into some of the common mistakes that teams are making right now. I should have done a build so you guys didn't read ahead, but there's some good content here that you can look at. The first one I want to draw your attention to, obviously, is that first line. There's this, I think, debate sometimes around phone versus email. I don't know why this is a debate. When you're talking about cadence, you need to have a proper balance, but because you're such a phone guy, I want you to comment on this. We have activity on our platform from across our entire customer base. And we saw that since the lockdown had begun in most states, email engagement dropped by 35%. Phone engagement stayed roughly the same. How would you respond to that? Why is that happening, and what should people do about it?
Sure. Well, the first things first is that you said I'm a phone guy. So listen, here's the thing. I don't care if you use the phone, email, you send a LinkedIn invite, or you send smoke signals or a carrier pigeon. The bottom line is you got to get a conversation going, and those conversations, you can't have a sales conversation through back and forth through email. You're never going to hit your quota that way. You might get a deal once. Well, we've all gotten that one client or that prospect that'll back and forth, all of a sudden they buy. But if that's your main go-to, you're never going to hit your quota. You're going to be out of a job. You're not going to make the kind of money that you can. So you have to be able to get a conversation going. So I don't care what medium that you use, but I think the reason why that you're seeing that the email engagement is down, the key word there is engagement. One, people are very stressed right now. Everybody's like crazy. Half the country's not used to working from home. So they went ahead and they're starting that process. Now they're also very worried on how are they going to, is there going to be food available at the store, whether they have money to buy it or not, right? Is it going to be on the shelves? So I think you're sending an email out right now. It's a lot easier to ignore and not respond to. The phone, if they pick it up, that's more of that interruption. And by the way, interruption, a lot of times people think interruptions in sales is a bad thing. You need to be interruptful. I mean, that's what an email is. Listen, an email is just as interruptful. It's just easier for them to ignore it or not respond to you. But in sales, unless we're dealing with strictly inbound leads, with warm leads, with hand raisers, we have to make those outbound touches. And so the reason why you haven't seen the engagement drop on the phone, one, it's probably because there's probably more output now than there was before because people are realizing they have to pick up the phone. But two, that engagement is still there because they're answering the phones, right? Especially if they have it forwarding to their cell phone or their home phone, whatever. And the email engagement, they're probably seeing it. They're just not responding because they got in their mind, they have other important things going on. But if you can get them on the phone, get a conversation going, that's why those numbers are the same, in my opinion.
That's a really good point. Now we've got some commentary. I'm getting some private Q&A. There's some interesting questions here, and I hear a lot about. I hear these questions on LinkedIn. I've responded to some of them, but I want to get your reaction. So Michael says that they're having a lot of people in the enterprise get negative pushback on cold calling because desk phones are being forwarded to their cells, and people are getting upset that they're bothering them during their children's homeschooling time. How do you deal with that hurdle?
Sure. Well, what's bothering them is it's not that they're getting their cell phones ring. It's that the message that the salesperson is saying isn't resonating. So they're wasting. So in other words, they're just this is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear, but most of your opening value statements is the problem. So the opening value statement, whether you're contacting somebody by phone, it has two objectives. You have to pique interest and gain permission to continue the call. If you're not piquing interest right away, they're going to be. That doesn't matter. It always makes me laugh when I see statistics, people put on LinkedIn that goes, 85% of people said that they don't like getting a cold call. It should be 100% of people don't really like getting a cold call, right? But the thing is that if you're there, if you have a solution to specific problems, you need to know how to pick your zebra out of the herd, the people that would probably have that problem. And then you need to know how to contact them, whether it's through phone, email, LinkedIn, combination of all three, voicemail, right? All that in order to pique their interest. And most salespeople, this is where they fail. They think cold calling is hard or it doesn't work because they're getting yelled at or they're not getting the response they want. What they don't realize is that their message is off.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example? If I cold call an enterprise right now and I got a VP of sales or a sales director on the phone and I say, hey, I'm calling because I provide online sales training solutions. They're like, dude, I don't have time for that. There's no budget. Half my people are I have to let them go. It's going to be a negative response right away, right?
Yeah.
If I call that same sales director and I go, listen, the reason for my call, I specialize in helping outbound sales teams overcome call reluctance. There's a possibility I might be able to help you. I just need to ask you a few questions. Would that be okay? I get like 98% of the people say, okay, I got a second, because I'm addressing a pain that I know they're having. They have their sales team, they're spread out everywhere. He or she knows a lot of them aren't making the calls that they should, and it's because they have call reluctance. And now they go, well, okay, how can you solve that for me? That's the difference.
I think that's a really good point. I don't want people to miss it in case it was subtle, but I think there is a tendency when you jump on the phone. I found this out as a sales rep. You want to go into an introduction. You want to say who you're with and what you do. You're like, there's almost wasted time there. You're saying, if you know the target pain of the customers that you're reaching out to, jump right at that pain. Be tactful, be empathetic, as a lot of people talk about now, but jump right into the pain. And you're saying go right into questions. Can I ask you a few questions about this pain? Is that a constant across industries? Do you take that kind of framework and apply it to
every industry? And here's the thing. So the opening value statement has a job. I don't care what industry you sell. If you're doing an outbound cold call or even a warm call, even if I get an inbound warm lead, somebody says, hey, I heard about your service, I'm interested, can I get some pricing? I would say, sure, no problem. Be more than happy to help you. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions just to make sure what we offer would be a good fit for you? Would that be okay? They always go, yeah, sure. So whether it's an inbound warm lead, which we all love, we would all prefer to have an inbound warm lead, but you still have to handle that the same way as an outbound cold call. The only difference is on a cold call, I have to pique their interest first and then gain that permission. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck using sales tactics that everybody's been taught, which are bogus, about how to establish control and try to ask them questions without gaining that permission. What ends up happening is you can hear the tension over the phone. Yeah. They might be answering it, but it's those short one-word answers. If you learn how to agitate that pain, scratch that itch, pique that curiosity in the first 5 to 15 seconds, and then know how to smoothly gain permission to continue the call, you're not going to catch them being mad at you or that you called. You're going to go, sure, I got a second, go ahead. Now, the problem is this. If you just created a window of opportunity for yourself. If you do not know how to handle that specific spot and what to do next, you're going to blow the call. But that's why sales is a process. It's a step-by-step process. And once you learn how to master each step, you start making more money. Sales is fun again.
So really good points. I'm going to make 2 points and then we can move on to the next line. The first one, it looks like in the chat window, I don't know if everyone can see this, but Mark Miller says it's only an interruption if you're not adding value. I think it's a great point. It speaks to what you're talking about. I mean, what's the job that people are trying to get done, and can you help them do that job? Speak to that, ask questions. I got another question that challenges the point about calling in the morning. So 9 to 10:30 might not be the best time for some industries or some people. You're saying that's when your highest energy. Is there a case to be made to do it at the end of the day, but make sure you block off the time? Like, what's the bigger
Yeah,
point?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's why if we go back, I said there's no perfect one size fits all. You have to know your industry. You have to know, your clientele, right? Early in my day and working in the boiler room, right? We had a process that was called follow the sun. We would know all the zip codes on the East Coast, and hour by hour, we just follow the sun and do it that way. So you really have to work what's for you. Just come up with a plan that you're comfortable with, that you believe in, and work your plan, and you're going to get better results. And by the way, when it comes to doing those first time calls first, the only exception really is when you have a scheduled set appointment on a follow-up call, right? So if I'm speaking to a client today and they go, hey, why don't you call me, let's say Wednesday, so they say, call me next Wednesday. I'm going to say to them, sure, do you want to pick a time or you just want to play it by ear? Right? I don't like to use the, hey, how about I call you at this time or that time, right? I don't want to try to control them that way. They can sense that. So I just make them feel like they're in control. I go, do you want to pick a time or you just want to play it by ear? Almost always they pick a time and I'll go, okay, great. So if they pick a time in the morning, I'm not going to say to them, hey, I can't call you then. I have to do my cold calls then. I'm going to take that time slot. So next Wednesday, when that time slot comes around, I just work around that, right? So obviously you just have to have some common sense there.
Yeah,
but you have to find, having a plan is better than just being a captain winging every day. And there's going to be days that you come in, you go, listen, from 9 to 10:30, I got my list ready to go. I'm going to do all my calls, and you're going to be halfway through, and something's going to happen occasionally that could throw you off or stop you from preventing you from completing your plan. It could be personal, it could be a business situation, whatever. But this is where you roll with the punches. And then that's also where I like to have that power hour at the end of the day from 4 to 5, or that last hour of the day, because anything that I wanted to get done on my list earlier on that first time call list, if I didn't get it done yet, I have that extra hour. And if for whatever reason I can't get it done that day, guess what? I bump it to the next day. I know I put a really good, strong effort in the day. I could log off work knowing I gave it my best, and tomorrow's a new day.
So this fits nicely into the next theme of prioritization. I love talking about prioritization in sales and marketing. It's a core competency of our Playbooks platform. And we've done a ton of research around this to really understand if there's a problem with prioritization and what that problem is. And I think I could sum it up by saying most teams struggle, and this is sales and marketing, most teams struggle with random acts of selling and random acts of marketing. The fact is it's incredibly easy to be busy on the wrong things. I've sat with sales teams, and I've field virtual teams, BDR teams. Almost every team can get caught into this trap of being really busy but on the wrong things. And when you peel back the layers of the research, what you find is, as it's listed here on the slide, 35% of your time is actually spent selling. That means there's a lot of wasted time where you're not doing the kinds of things you should be doing to generate revenue. Of that 35%, you're spending 3 times more time on the wrong things, on the wrong deals, on the wrong accounts, on the wrong leads. So do you have a methodology? I mean, we obviously have a point of view on prioritization, and we leverage AI and data to make sure that teams are oriented to the right things. What would you say in terms of prioritization? Is there a set of principles that you follow to make sure that you're not wasting your time, that you're spending it on the right kinds of activities and the right kinds of deals and accounts?
Yeah, so there's a couple things here. First of all, salespeople have been oversold on the need and value for research. So in other words, what I mean by, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying, everybody. Research is important, but they've been oversold on it, so where they feel like they have to spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes per account researching something. You should have a 2-minute cap when you're looking at a lead to research, to determine if they qualify as a suspect. You should know your ICP, your ideal customer profile, so well that and matter of fact, a lot of times I'm pulling up my list. I pull up the LinkedIn profile while I'm dialing the number. I can see everything I need right then and there. So within 2 minutes or less. So, again, I'll just repeat it. I think a lot of salespeople have been oversold on the research of it, aspect of it, and really they bought it hook, line, and sinker because deep down inside they're suffering from call reluctance. And if they really analyze, if they work things backward of why they're doing this task instead of dialing the phone, or why they're getting to this and not prioritizing, it's because they're not satisfied. They're not happy with the results they're getting. They don't like touching the stove and getting burned. And it all comes back to sales skills. You need to fix that, and then the call reluctance will go away. With that being said, it really, again, there's not going to be one size fits all. Some companies have lead lists where, like, for example, we're using automation through our database where if somebody visits certain pages on our website, we can see that if they've been on there for the last 24 hours, I can click a button, give me that list, and I'm ready to go. And it has certain parameters. Great. When I first got into selling, it was a phone book, right? It had to go through and build your list that way. So between the phone book and then the automation, with all the people that we have here, they're going to have different scenarios on where they get their list. I would strongly encourage you not to be looking to see who to call in the morning. I would try to get there early and build that list, or at the end of the previous day, build that list so that when you come in the next day, it's ready to go. If you have to, outsource that part of it. Get an intern, get a junior sales rep. So, hey, listen, this is what we need. I need you to look this. I need you to build this list up. Then you even teach them how to do those phone calls. That's how an SDR role got started. I mean, if you ever seen the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, a lot of times people think SDRs and BDRs is a new role. That shit's been going on since the 80s. They just called it something different. They've had that role to where you build that list, you cut your teeth on that, you learn how to build a list, how to get them on the phone, and then you move into that closer role. So there's all kinds of little things that you guys can do to map out your day. You just got to think differently. If you're not satisfied with the results you're getting, break from the mold of what you're currently doing, think outside the box, and then make things work for you. So if, like I said, if calling in a certain time isn't for your audience and it's more in the afternoon because of the location, she said she was in, the one comment was in Asia, great, make that work for you. That's the point. Just create a plan that you're comfortable with and then work the plan.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears a little bit towards coaching and the sales leadership role. I've become fascinated by the psychology of mentoring and coaching. I'm actually doing, there's this book that Gallup produced. I can't remember the name of it, but they have this assessment where you kind of understand your strengths and how to optimize those in the workplace. But the book begins with this point about employee engagement. I know this might feel like a stretch to everyone on the phone, but it's actually worth understanding. They've done a ton of studies to find that only 15% of employees actually feel engaged at work. They feel engaged with their employer. And I think this translates very well into how sales leaders approach their teams. If the sales team and the sales reps don't feel engaged at work, and if they don't feel engaged in what they're doing on their teams, they're not going to be as effective as they otherwise could be. And I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn, a lot of articles written about how to coach, how often to coach, what the secret formula is. I loved what Gallup said. They said that the future of work is maximizing human potential. And I think this fits so well into this notion of being not just a boss, but a mentor, a coach, helping teams understand their strengths and being able to shore up those skills that they need to be successful, especially in sales roles. We've actually seen on our platform, when lockdown began, usage went up like crazy. But one of the most interesting things was call recording, call monitoring went up by a factor of 10. I mean, obviously leaders have maybe an increased interest in understanding what their teams are doing with that notion of prioritization. They want to make sure that their teams are focused on the right things, but they also want to make sure that they're getting the right coaching, the right mentoring in place so that they can be effective when they're so disconnected. What are your thoughts on driving the right kind of coaching culture that can lead teams to maximize their potential?
Sure. So there's responsibilities on both sides here, from the company side and from the employee side. So this kind of reminds me. Let me say it this way. So first of all, with the COVID thing, everybody's being working home. My wife and I have been binging a lot of the original Amazing Races. If you guys ever seen the Amazing Race, big fans, but we missed the first couple seasons, so we've been going back and binge watching that a little bit. And every race, if you're last on some of those races, you get cut. Right? Well, if you're a sales rep and you're one of 10 and your manager, your sales director has 10 sales reps, they're not going to be able to give equal time to everybody. So you have to be willing to want to be better, right? That the last and the last thing a sales manager or sales director should be doing is trying to make that one sales rep the best sales rep when they're not putting the effort in themselves. So the thing is this, is there's responsibility on both sides. There should be the training, there should be the coaching there. More importantly, I think it's important for the company on the side to treat their employees with the respect and be ready to help, because I've worked in organizations where it wasn't that way, right? So I'm speaking from experience there. And on the flip side, you, as a sales rep, you have to be, listen, I want my manager's attention. I want help. I want to get better. And so that could mean that you might have to come in early. You're role playing. You're asking them to record your calls and then analyzing them with you. You're asking them to track the number of dials that you've done, you know, what your talk time is, and then compare that to who the top reps are. You're looking for ways to get better. And that's how you get the time. That's also, by the way, one of the secrets of how you start getting those hot warm leads, that when they come in, the manager, we all have been in that scenario, right? Where you're supposed to be doing outbound, but every once in a while, a hot inbound lead or referral come in, and then the top rep in the group gets it. Well, if you want to start getting some of those, you have to show the initiative, show that you're getting better, prove that you're getting better, right? And then some of those leads are coming your way. And then that's what I would recommend. I've seen that play out on both sides. But if you're a sales rep that just continues to want to do it your way, you're argumentative, you're not coachable, you don't deserve the manager's time, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I want to talk about handoffs. So there's some context to this question. We had Heather Sinzak, who's the CMO of Pluralsight and a customer of ours. She spoke at our next event in February. We were like the last SaaS customer conference to be held before everything locked down. But anyways, one of her key points was about the handoff. And she told this story, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. I'm going to offend some people not knowing Olympic history, but I think it was in the Atlanta Olympics, the U.S. relay team was not pegged as the best team in the world, but they won. And the reason why they won is because they had perfected the handoff between the different racers in the relay. And she made this point that she's achieved success with her sales and marketing organizations by perfecting that handoff between marketing, BD, sales, customer success. This is another one of those instances where I don't think there's a one size fits all. Every organization might have a different motion and a different process. But do you have any thoughts as to what handoffs ought to look like? How do you make a clear handoff and eliminate the confusion that exists between these, sometimes four disparate teams that aren't always in sync, and sometimes that leads to broken funnels? I mean, how do you fix that problem? I know it's a bigger question than what
I love it. I love it, because here's the thing. It boils down to what the objectives are. The problem is when it's a broken funnel like that, you're referring to with the handoff, a lot of times it's because the SDRs they were given the wrong goals, and the pressure is on the wrong side of things for them, meaning they're being pressured to set appointments. So what they're doing is they're just focusing on setting the appointments. They're not taking the time to see if they're setting the right appointments for the right reasons with the right people. Yeah. And so that's a big scenario, right? So if I'm getting paid, incentivized to set a number of appointments, it doesn't matter. I'm just calling and I'm trying to set the appointment. And a lot of times what that happens is the SDRs will struggle, because the other side of it, they're hearing, well, we want to set an appointment with you so you can speak with so-and-so regarding this. They're going, yeah, I already got something like that. I don't need it. Right. So they're not taking the time to go, hey, there's a possibility I can help you solve this. I just need to ask you some questions. Would that be okay? They go, okay, I got a second. Then you ask them a couple of questions. Next thing you know, the prospect recognizes a problem. The SDR recognizes a problem. Goes, there's a possibility I might be able to help you fix it. Let me just ask you this. And now maybe you pepper in a qualifying question or two on their role, and then you set the appointment up. And then it would either be a hot transfer, which I prefer, right? If you got them on the phone, making a hot transfer call. Listen, I could say something as simple as, there's a real strong possibility we might be able to help you solve X, Y, Z. What I'd like to do is this. I'd like to have you, one of our specialists, speak with you real quick. They'll explain how it works. And if you like what you hear, you can just take it from there. Is that fair enough? Is that okay? And they're like, okay, sure. And you just do the hot transfer like that. If it has to be where you're setting up a call, then it would come to, you have to have that sincerity and say, listen, based on everything you're telling me, I really do believe there's a chance we might be able to help you solve X. What I'd like to do is this. I'd like to set you up with a call with our specialist. they'll explain how it works. You can ask them any questions you have. And if you like what you hear, you guys can take it from there. Would that be okay? Okay, sure, great. Now you set the appointment. What you don't want to do a lot of times, and I know this because I had a client that was having this issue and I listened to the calls. You don't want that insincerity where you ask some questions and then no matter what they say, you go, well, hey, you qualify for this. I'd like to set this up. I'd like to set you up with a meeting. If it doesn't sound sincere, like you're not genuine, that guard's going to come up. So even if you do set the appointment or they're not really sure what it's about, when it gets to the other person, there's that disconnect. And I know I'm like giving like 3 or 4 different examples, but it really has to come down to the SDR has to understand, or the BDR, whatever you want to call it these days. They have to genuinely see if there's a call to see if you can help solve a problem. If you do that, you'll get more conversations going. And once you truly identify that there's a problem that you can help solve, and then you pepper in a couple of qualifying questions to make sure they're the right person to speak to. They're not just an end user, right? They're part of the decision-making team, or they're at least an influencer or what have you. Once you have that, then you just have to have that sincere transition. What we'd like to do is this, like, see if I can help you solve this, speak with a product specialist. They'll explain how it works, answer any questions. If you like what you hear, you can just take it from there. Would that be okay? You're going to get so many yeses on that now all of a sudden, now the person that's taking it over, here's the other bigger problem. They get the lead, they get the appointment, and they jump right into a presentation. They go, let me show you this. And they're just showing them anything and everything. They have no idea what's most important to them, what the purchasing process is, or anything. And if it doesn't work to their satisfaction, they blame the SDR. Yeah. What the account executive should be doing is going, thanks for taking the meeting. I understand you're trying to solve X, Y, Z. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions before I just show you how to solve that? Sure. And then you just make sure you ask the questions, get the right information that you need, and now you custom that presentation to their needs, and you're gonna have much better success that way.
This is why I actually posted about this on LinkedIn. It's specifically to the discovery call. I know this isn't about handoffs specifically, but understanding how to run a proper discovery meeting or discovery call with a customer can set the stage for the entire sales process. I think a lot of reps don't do it correctly. Like you said, they jump right into presentation mode. It's about, I think it's Barry Ryan, who's a sales expert, sales consultant. He also teaches at Stanford. He wrote a book called Selling Through Curiosity. It's about being curious, really uncovering things before you jump into the meat and bones of whatever it is you're trying to pitch. I think there's a good principle there. Actually leads into my next point about cold calling. You've already told us what you think is sort of the best approach to kicking off a cold call when you actually connect with somebody. I'm now interested in knowing whether it's the cold call or a discovery meeting. How do you lock down next steps? Because one of the biggest problems I see with sales teams is they don't clarify what the process is going to be for the customer. And if there's any confusion for the customer, they're not going to be able to self-navigate. They're not going to know what to expect coming. So they kind of need that laid out for them. So what do you do? I mean, if it's a cold call, let's start there.
Whether it's a cold call or an inbound warm lead, the sales process is the same, and it hasn't changed since the first thing that's been sold in the history of man. I know a lot of people say the sales process has changed. It's wrong. It always starts with, there's a step 1, 2, 3, and 4, even on an inbound lead. So here's the thing. Before I get off on a big tangent on that, let me just go ahead and answer your question. Most salespeople, let's just take cold calling, they don't know whether they're an SDR or they handle the process A to Z. They have no idea what the process is. And they've been selling for 10, 15 years. They just think, I got to get them on the phone. I got to get them talking. Okay, so what's the first question you're supposed to ask? If I guarantee you, I could take 10 salespeople from any company that's listening to this right now, unless they've gone to my class already, right? And then I could ask them, all 10 people from one company, what's the first question you ask once you get the conversation going? I'm probably going to get 7 different answers.
Well, let's try that out. I mean, in the chat window, why don't you guys tell us what's the first question you ask on a cold call, and let's see what the responses are. I mean, you can go ahead and continue the point that you're making, but I be honest with it with this question. What's the first question you ask on a cold call? I'm saying ask permission to continue. How have you been? What do you need? Is what I ask the customer. From Mike. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing these responses. Are you open for business? That's probably a good one.
Look at all the different responses we're getting. See, it just proved my point. So here's the thing. So you're asking the best intro on a cold call and what's the next step. The sales process is this, especially if you're selling B2B by phone, right? Yeah, there's 4 phases. It's very simple. Just think of it as baseball terms. There's 4 phases, right? Phase 1 is your openers. And your openers has a very specific job. It has to do 2 things in this order. I said it earlier. Your opening value statement has to pique interest and then gain permission to continue the call. Okay. And if you know how to pique interest, gaining permission is going to be easy. The reason why you want to gain permission to continue the call is because if you're not asking questions in the beginning of a sales call, that means you're doing a data dump. So that means you're skipping stage, the second stage of the sales cycle, which is qualifying, and you're going right to the third stage, which is presentation. So you're doing a mini data dump. You don't even know what problems they have. They might not see the problems yet. You don't even know if they're the right person. Just because they have the title of somebody you want doesn't mean they're the right person to speak to within their company, right? So you have all these things to unpack. So stage 1, you have to have an opening value statement that piques interest and gains permission to continue the call. Stage 2 is qualifying, but here's the thing. There's literally 3 phases to qualifying. Most people just think I'm qualifying by seeing if they're the decision maker or not. That's only a third of it. There's other aspects of the qualifying that they have to get. Stage 3 is presentation. Stage 4 is closing. It's, if you really think about it as sales in a process like that, and again, it won't matter if you are selling SaaS, computer software, logistics, IT hardware, doesn't matter. The sales process is literally the same, whether it's an inbound warm lead or it's a straight up outbound cold call. You have to follow the process. If you're an SDR and you're charged with setting appointments, if you want that appointment to stick, and if you get bonused on if they close, you're going to only want to set up appointments with people that are part of the decision-making team and they have a problem that's facing them right now that you can help them solve. And so you need to know how to agitate that pain, scratch the itch. Don't forget, if it's a cold call, most of the people you're contacting already have some kind of solution for what is it you offer. They don't realize that their solution that they have is part of a problem. That's the difference between a cold call and a warm lead. A warm call is when they are raising their hand. It's because they already recognize the problem. But you still have to know how to handle that, because just because it's an inbound warm lead, it could be the decision maker. It could be an intern who was asked to look into it and get 3 quotes, right? So you need to know how to ask those questions, and you have to get to first base first, then the second and the third before you can take it to home.
Now I'm getting a couple of questions asking for you to go through those 3 stages of qualifying again. That came up 3 or 4 times. Can you double down on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously stage 1 is what's called problem recognition. Okay, and this is probably the biggest step salespeople miss. And listen, I get people that take my class they send me emails like, I wish I took this 20 years ago. They've been selling forever and they wish they learned this long. It's a very simple principle. Okay, you have to get problem recognition. You can't call and tell a prospect they have a problem because they're going to doubt it. Let me give you an example. Have you ever asked, this is for everybody that's in here, right? We've got over 300 people in here. Have you ever did a discovery call? You asked a couple of questions based on what your prospect said. You said, oh, I know I have a much better solution. And then you go ahead and you give your solution, and then you go for a close and a prospect says, yeah, I mean, that sounds good, but I think we'll just stick with what we have. And you're like, I just showed you how I can save you all this time and money. Have you ever got that response? If you have, it's because you missed one of the critical steps in the qualifying phase. You never got problem recognition. You have to establish, and you can't call and tell your prospect they have a problem because they're going to doubt it. So you have to know what questions to ask, when to ask, how to ask, why to ask, and to establish if there's problem recognition. If you get problem recognition, you're done with phase 1 of qualifying. Phase 2 of qualifying is to identify their real role in the decision-making process. Let me give you another one. Stop me if you've heard this before. You've asked if they're the decision maker. They said yes. You're like, great. You go through the whole process. You go for a close, and they go, I got to check with so-and-so. Does that ever happen? Of course it has. Because you didn't properly qualify them on their role in the decision-making process. The third thing is this, which is just super controversial, because almost every sales manager in the world will tell you to not go ahead and talk about price until after the presentation. And that is so wrong, because let me ask you this. Have you ever gone through the whole process and then they say it's not in the budget?
Yeah.
You did a whole presentation online, whatever, you go for a close, send a proposal, and go, yeah, it's not in the budget. Okay? Well, there's only one of two scenarios. They're either telling the truth or they're lying.
Yep.
We're conditioned to believe that they're always lying, and that's not the case. There's going to be sometimes that you went after a prospect that should have never gotten the presentation. They're looking for a Ferrari. They need to go to the broken down Kia lot, right? So there's a difference here. On the flip side, if you would have learned how to properly qualify that before the presentation, you would have removed the number one objection most salespeople get, which is we can't afford it, it's not in the budget. If you learn to preempt that strike, when you get to the end, your close rate shoots up, because it's like everything makes sense. Like, okay, yeah, we're in. And then now they might want to negotiate, but you're not hearing it's not in the budget. And then I would teach you how to close the deal. So those are the three phases of qualifying. But just knowing them is like, okay, I don't mind sharing that. But now the question is, well, how do we do that? What questions do I ask? Things of that nature. And then so you have to map all this stuff out. We need more time than just a few minutes to
I totally agree, man. You could go on for a couple hours, I think, just on that one point. If anyone didn't catch that, or you want to review that, we'll have a recorded version of this webinar for you to look back on. We only have a couple of minutes left. I did have a few additional questions I wanted to ask. Maybe we can't go through all of this, but I want to hit on as much as we can, and we'll try to be quick with our responses and then end. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was consistency. So I've done a lot of customer interviews. And it's interesting, one of the words that comes up as a problem that needs to be solved by almost every sales leader out there, especially in the enterprise, is they want to create and drive more consistency across their teams, and it's difficult. Why is that difficult? How do you scale consistent, good effort? Well,
let's go back. Remember earlier I said, okay, I'm going to ask one question. What's the first question you're supposed to ask, right? And you saw how we got like a bazillion different answers. Mm-hmm. It's literally because a lot of times people think that sales is more art than it is science. Mm-hmm. Okay, listen, sales isn't rocket science, but there is a science to it, and you have to have a playbook, right, that maps each stage of the process there. Too many people think, like, let's take sales scripts, for example. They go like, I don't want a sales script because the prospect won't follow that along. Well, that just means that your sales script was flawed. Your sales script, actually, I don't like sales scripts because in the sense of traditional sales scripts, I think they create more problems than they solve. You need a playbook which gives you the room to breathe and has, okay, I'm going to ask this question. I already know they're going to answer this way or this way. If they answer this way, we go down this path. If they answer this way, we go down that path, right? But the problem is too many companies are trying to hire people. They look for previous background and whatnot, and then they just say, go, right? Here's our basic stuff and go, just get it done. And the problem is you always get, every company will have that unicorn where somebody has that natural intuition and they hit it out of the park, and then the manager wants everybody else to be like them, but they can't, right? And so what you need to do is you have to have a process in place. Give the sales reps the freedom to use the language that's comfortable with them. But listen, meaning this, I don't care if you get to first base by a single, you get hit by the pitch, or you bunt your way on, or you get walked on, right? However you get there, that's what you got to do. You got to get there. You use your strategy you want to get there, but that's the process. And then this is how we get to second. This is how we get to third. So like your opening value statement, I have companies that I've taught them how to custom create their first 15 seconds to get the conversation going. And they can have, if they have 10 sales reps, they could all use the same one, or they could have 10 individual ones, but they're following the formula to create interest. Right? They just use different words that they're comfortable with, or they have different personalities, but they're following the process. If the team is not consistent, it's a long answer to your question, but if the bottom line is this, if the team is not consistent, it's because there's not a well-defined sales process for selling by phone of each stage of what one question links to the next and why. And that's the problem, and that needs to get fixed.
Love it. Well, like I said, I think we could spend hours on each of these topics individually. We've come up on time, so we can't go through the remaining two questions. We're going to have a lot of content in the future on automation and leading from anywhere. I know there's a lot of trending topics out there that we could spend our time on. But just to wrap things up, Michael, I think you've piqued a lot of interest, and obviously your point of view is pretty well valued in the sales community. If they want to know more about you, I've got your URL there. Is there any parting thoughts you wish to give to this audience?
Listen, I know what it feels like to have the phone feel like a 25-pound weight and you just don't want to pick it up anymore. I've had as a straight commission sales rep, I've been early in my marriage where, you know what, we're not going to have anything for Christmas, right? And I built that. And I just, instead of blaming the leads or the economy or whatever, I just kept saying, what am I doing wrong? I kept perfecting my craft. So much to the point to where I know this sales process so well and it works so high that I was able in the .com era to start my own company when everybody else was going out of business, build it, sell it for a 7-figure deal, and then start another company in the down economy and build that. And I've been able to train thousands of people around the world on how to sell by phone. It's my passion. If you need help, I'd love to help you. If you just want to go ahead to our blog, there's a search feature there. You can look up just about anything on inside sales and get some free information there as well.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining. For my part, if you have any questions about playbooks or XANT, you can go to xant.ai/playbooks. We've got a great new day in the life video. It gives you kind of a flavor of how reps and managers use our product to connect to their customers quickly by engaging their ideal customers in the most effective ways. We look forward to seeing you on future webinars and podcasts. But until then, be safe. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, guys.